And I was actually classified in an article from the International Business Times here in London as a cyber terrorist. Of course, that didn't fly very well with the U.S. and they said more evil things about me. So.
So you should. There we go. So you get the obligatory little notice at the top.
Cool.
So for those of you who are new to the channel, welcome to the Data Protection Diaries. This is our pub chat podcast series. For some reason, that's really hard to say, so I have to slow it down when I say it so I don't trip over. The whole point of this series was just to talk to people that we found interesting and get to know people in the privacy and cybersecurity space, and that's what we've been aiming to do. Today, I am really excited because we are joined by Mike Jones. Mike is a former member of Anonymous and has a huge experience of cybersecurity and the world at large. And I think it's just going to be a really fascinating conversation. But I will let you introduce yourself, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. My name is Mike Jones. Great to be here. It's been an exciting year or so since I've gotten to the UK. I'm from the United States. I was formerly part of Anonymous. Wasn't prosecuted, but had charges pending. Did some work for the government as a confidential informant to kind of make things even. And recently, a year ago, came over to the UK to start my brand of security here, and became a public speaker kind of by accident. But it kind of blew up, and here I am.
Awesome. So how do you find? Do you get looked at differently now that you're in the UK?
Oh, by far. My friends back in the States give me a hard time because, of course, I went back to England, and especially during 4th of July, it's very difficult to deal with those people. But coping in the UK, it's been kind of difficult. I came over. I was working for another company. I was coming over back and forth for work, and it became pretty taxing going back and forth all the time. I decided to make my home in the UK. So I came over a year ago, established where I wanted to be, and was doing public speaking and whatnot. Went to fly back to the US to visit family and go to some hacking conferences. And somehow my passport came up missing out of the hotel. Nothing else was touched, just the passport. And it was hidden. The US Embassy was very encouraging to help me, fill out the lost passport application and get this some new emergency passport. But it was kind of funny because after I got done filling out the paperwork for the lost passport, it was like I became a non-issue because they denied my passport reissue. Basically told me that I was in the UK with no country. So I can't go back to the States, and I don't have citizenship here. So you can see how it can get a little difficult at times navigating through a country where you're not a citizen. Yeah. But I'm learning. It's taken a little bit of a learning curve, but I'm pretty resourceful, and then I can always find a way to survive. So
that's mental. You can't just abandon somebody in a different country. Well, you can. I suppose you can.
They do it all the time. Yeah,
they can do whatever they like. Yeah. We'll get on to the Anonymous stuff because I'm like mad excited to talk about that. But for me, like the first thing I wanted to get to know about you is where does this all start? Like everyone talks about, I've always wanted to be in cybersecurity. I've always wanted to do this. Like, was that always a thing? Did you fall into it? Did it just make sense?
It was kind of strange. So to go back to my childhood, to the proverbial "what do you want to be when you grow up?" question. I think my first answer to that question was a priest, of all things. Not really sure why. And I went from a priest to a butcher, and not really sure why about that either, other than the fact that the local butcher in my town was very nice to me. He was an old man, and I was a little kid, and we had kind of a connection. But then the last thing I wanted to be was a professional boxer. So I kind of geared towards that and started working out as a kid and trying to go that direction. But, one thing that set me apart from the other kids, I knew I was different from a really young age. I looked at things a little bit differently. I felt like I socialized differently with other kids. I got older, I realized that, I definitely had some pretty high anxiety, and my thought process was a little bit different. So I have Asperger's, which really has more to do with routine and social interactions, stuff like that. But I've learned how to cope with it. Public speaking has been a really great tool to help me get over that, and to help me learn how to deal with the issues that I have. When I first started talking, my first talk was 40 people at Robert Gordon University up in Scotland, and it went from that to groups of 300 to foreign travel, stuff like that. But it's sort of like a talent that I had when I was born, I guess. When it came to computers, most people were looking how they worked and wanted to and do really cool stuff with their new computer. But as a kid, I was more concerned about what's inside. Can I take this apart? Can I make it do things that it shouldn't do? Because to me, a computer out of a box was pretty boring. I wanted to make it do things that craft it to make it do spectacular things. So I started breaking things quite often. VCRs, computers, cell phones. I remember my mom's first laptop. I borrowed it and was messing around with some code and wrote a virus, but didn't pack it, didn't zip it. And so my mom's laptop became a complete mess. That was my first negative consequence from hacking was with my mom's laptop. So that's how I got started.
That's probably the most serious impact as well. Like ruining your mum's laptop. She's never going to forgive you for that.
No, she still talks about it.
That's the most serious thing that you've done. The US can take your passport, but your mum will always be annoyed.
That's right. She will take away your birthday.
I like that. So then, because we talk a lot on this channel about getting into cybersecurity and what people do, and whether having a degree is good or whether it's about just having an interest and building like your own knowledge path. So did your knowledge path come from just literally just playing around, just being on the internet, taking stuff apart, seeing what you could do, and then you thought, actually, I could probably make some money doing this?
Yeah, IRC, back in the day, that was my form of communication, and just talk to people and really live my life on the internet. And I realized that, after things got a little, scary with law enforcement and whatnot, pen testing was an easy route for me to go, because I already had the skill hacking, and I really didn't need to sharpen that. It was just a matter of sliding into the industry and getting started. And with pen testing, it's really a unique situation for pen testers, right? And for people who get hired into large companies, because they always want someone with my background or with some sort of mystique, right? But with that mystique comes a level of risk. Knowing that I'd been pursued by law enforcement before could pose, a risk to a company in the future. But they still want that uniqueness. They want to trust the individual coming in, but at the same time, they don't. But really, the only people in my mind, so books and degrees and all that stuff is great. I encourage anybody who has the capability of maintaining and getting a degree to go for it. I unfortunately have a hard time in structured learning environments like that. But yeah, for all means, go for it. But I find the people that I hire that are most effective are people that either have the skills that aren't taught, that are self-taught, and that are creative, or people who are very, very new to cybersecurity, very new to IT in general. Because I find it easier to help mold their path than to deal with 20 years of experience and very hard set on this is the way we do things. Because my pen tests are very fluid and very creative. I look at it like painting a picture. Everything I do on the network, I visualize in my mind first, and then play it out through the network. But those are the type of people I look for, are creative people. Certifications are great, but again, it's an industry. It's a money-making industry. It proves that a person can take a test on said material, and really that's all it says. It doesn't tell me anything about their ethics. It doesn't tell me anything about their communication skills with C-level suites, and nothing like that. It's just a very basic baseline HR requirement, the way I look at it.
So when you're doing, like, when you're running a pen test, or when you're looking at testing someone's network or systems, do you tend to approach it with like a commercial mindset, or do you still approach it with the mindset that you had when the things that you were doing weren't necessarily as legitimate? Because there's always that argument: what's the point in testing a known
Right.
against testing? Actually, you want a burglar to come and tell you whether or not your house is safe, because the average person doesn't look at a house and go, oh, I can jimmy this window, or I could jimmy that. So it makes sense to have somebody like you come and look at a system, because you're not looking for the things that normal people look for. You're looking for the things that make sense to you, so that you can cause some damage.
Yeah.
Did you take that sort of different mindset still?
I do, but the mindset that I take isn't from a generic bad guy perspective, and it's not from a pen testy side of it. It's more of looking at the company that I'm doing the work for, finding out who their biggest threats are, what are their critical operations, and who may pose a threat to those operations, or who may want to interrupt those operations. By doing that, I look at different groups that are similar to those threats, or if I can identify a group that's targeting that company, I will model the adversary. I will use the same tools that they use, the same techniques, same methods of entry, persistence, all that stuff. I try to mimic exactly what they would see from an adversary. And to me, that's the most effective. It's people get into the habit of doing a pen test, and the thing they're looking at is a vulnerability scan report. And a lot of pen testing companies, it's sad, but there are a few out there that will do a test and basically give you the vulnerability report, and that's it, and tell you, oh, this could possibly be exploited, but we didn't try it. I look at everything, and then I take a manual approach to it, probe each system I see a potential critical opening with.
Do you find, from your position, that there's more legitimacy in coming at a pen test from your background now than there was previously? So it's now more comfortable having somebody like you come into an organization, whereas 10 years ago it might have been, whoa, why have you let him in the door?
Well, it depends on the industry. So yeah, I mean, today a lot of companies seem to be a little bit more relaxed, but there's still that concern there. And I think that's more of a people problem, a communication problem within industries that cause that. But yeah, I mean, it's relaxing a little bit. Now, in the government, strangely enough, in the U.S., the government was one of the first ones to really take to ex-hackers, really saw the value in their capabilities, brought us in to test different SCADA systems for DHS, run different exercises for them. So they see the value, but that hasn't trickled down into the commercial world yet.
So let's going back to the less legitimate side of what you did, like the more interesting bit. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
We like that you're legitimate now, but before you were legitimate. So you've destroyed your mum's laptop. Job number one off the list. Yeah. This was, I presume, this is a good 20 years ago. So the internet is fully in its infancy. People don't really understand what the world is like. How did that then progress to the point where you become a member of probably the best known hacktivist organization in the world? Does somebody just ring you up and be like, yeah, Mike, do you want to come in?
I wish that was a process, but that didn't quite work that way. Basically what happened, I had been in the darker side of the internet since the dawning of the internet, I guess, since I first got on. Made connections with different groups that were interested in hacking games and doing different things that weren't mainstream. So I got involved with them. I set up a website called stinger.com. And with that website, we held different hacking challenges, crypto challenges. It was just something fun for the hacking community that was very new. It was all coming together, and it was really exciting back then. And so I partnered with a group out of Poland called PLD Soft, and they were a hacking crew out of Poland. And from that point, it just seemed like I was getting different connections to, people contacting me from different groups. And so I kind of like drifted between. I was in Anonymous. I messed around with WorldSec for a while. I was in a couple of the APT groups. One of them by accident. It wasn't even intentional. Ended up striking up a conversation in Russian with a contact, and ended up spiraling into, APT 28. So yeah, I mean, there's two routes on the internet really that kids can take. A lot of kids get on the internet and they see the games and they see the fun route, and use it for school, and then others see what's behind the game and try to get the advantage. And that's with any life. These kids that end up becoming hackers look for that challenge, fight the norm, and don't want to fall into a mold. And that's something that's completely different than the other group of kids who strictly stays within the black and white lines of this is how you operate things and this is how you're supposed to do the work on the internet. We didn't follow that route, obviously.
So do you think it was, for you, was it like born out of like a political bias, like it just doing this kind of stuff suited your political stance, or was it just interesting, or did you just want to cause carnage, or was it good fun?
When I was younger, it started out as fun. And I used to joke with my friends that I felt like a magician. I had an ability to do things that other people weren't able to do with computers. And it was just fun. And then it became more of, as I got older, it became more of a political voice, especially after I left the military and saw some of the things that occurred during wartime, and some of the intelligence that came across wasn't really things that I wanted to be part of. And so back then, the government, especially after 9/11, the government in the U.S. really clamped down on anybody they feared, hackers, potential terrorists, anybody that they thought, had an upper hand on them in some area. Hence the Patriot Law. The Patriot Act came out and gave you the ability to snitch on your neighbors or whatever. And I was actually classified in an article from the International Business Times here in London as a cyber terrorist. Of course, that didn't fly very well with the U.S. and said more evil things about me. So, but yeah, I mean that's the kind of things that you tend to deal with. But it became being anonymous. I was a hacktivist above a hacker, and so yeah, it suited my political stance and what I believed in. I feel very strongly about the Constitution of the U.S. and I'm also a Freemason, so I believe in preserving that Constitution that we had in the U.S. And now, I mean, as time went by within Anonymous, you start to see things deteriorate, groups splintering off and falling apart, and getting arrested, and then things getting pretty violent, physically and kinetic during the Ferguson riots. And that's not something I wanted to be a part of. And the FBI made it very clear that that was probably a good choice not to be part of that, and kind of helped me with my transition out of the group and out of that lifestyle.
That's mental. So I know there's things that we can talk about and things that we can't talk about. But in terms of when things start crashing down, I mean, are we talking like dawn raid on your house, or was it?
It was.
How does that work?
It started in 2008. So 2008, I went to Las Vegas for a hacking convention, and there was a few young ladies from a university on the East Coast that were putting together a documentary called "Hackers Are People Too." And there was a section within the documentary that was pretty much focused on the EFF, which is the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which looks at digital rights, hacktivist rights, stuff like that, and try to protect the hacktivists. So my question was, to me, was how do I feel about the laws, the cyber laws that are in place now? And I didn't sugarcoat it. I laid it out like it was, that people in DC were making laws about technology they knew nothing about, and it was a bunch of fat cats with fat wallets that were bending towards whatever outlet they could get money from. They were going to support that type of cyber law justification and anything that they could put in place. but after that documentary, then it came out that against the government, that there was all kinds of negative things that were flying around. When all I was actually doing was voicing my opinion. It was just straight out facts of the laws that had failed in the past due to people who were disconnected. But the FBI showed up at my work, and they showed up at other places just unannounced, wanted to take me to lunch to discuss things. And there was always questions to me about people I knew, and they all fell within the anonymous label. And so I knew where it was going. And eventually, the agent that was investigating me was also investigating Barrett Brown, who was the voice of Anonymous. And Barrett, they kept asking questions about Barrett and trying to loop me into that, trying to connect me to Barrett. And I was trying to keep as much space as possible because I knew the more people I was connected to in their eyes, the more charges I was probably facing. Yeah. So they ended up arresting Barrett. Barrett did some time. I got lucky during that whole raid with LulzSec and with Strat4 and all that chaos. I kind of slipped out the back door. And I don't know if that was intentional that they let me do that, or if it was something that, they were too wrapped up in something else to go after me, because at the time I wasn't as big a fish as maybe Barrett Brown. Mm-hmm. So yeah, after that, it was, a while. I still played both sides of the fence, doing security, during the daytime, and then destroying companies at night. But, eventually that came to a head, and the FBI called me into a meeting downtown Houston at the Wells Fargo building. I went up, got stuck in a man trap, got down, the whole X-ray, all this stuff. And I go into a boardroom with about 20 people, and it was all U.S. Attorney's Office, FBI, Secret Service, and my lawyer. And they ended up giving me a Russian linguist interpreter, as well as two agents that kind of helped me out, or for lack of better terms, were my handlers during the whole CI process. And I had to sign a bunch of paperwork, like a OIA, which is a otherwise illegal activity, which basically stated that, if they had me do something illegal, it was for justice, whatever that is. It was for justice. And if I went outside of that, then I could be arrested for committing a crime if I went beyond the cutoff point of the crime that they're already having me commit. Yeah. It blew my mind. It's like, you tell me I'm facing charges, but then you're having me sign a document so I can go out and commit more crimes for you this time. So it didn't make any sense, but that's what I dealt with. And, eventually came down to doing a year's worth of confidential informant work for the FBI. Not with an anonymous or anything domestic. It was all foreign intelligence, like APT-28, APT-1. And it was 2016, so it was the election time. So there was a lot of work going on.
Yeah. God, that's insane. It's mad that I think sometimes you see about this stuff in the news, and you hear conversations about it, but I don't think people always appreciate the reach that governments have and the powers they have to just turn things on and turn things off as they see fit. Like it's insane. So yeah. Do you miss like that world? Do you think that the things that Anonymous and those kind of groups stood for, do you think they still stand for the right thing? That actually maybe the way has been lost a bit now?
I think that the government's done a really good job at disrupting the groups. They planted people in the groups that were, insiders, and funnel out information back to them. So they were able to disrupt the domestic groups pretty well. But there is a resurgence of Anonymous, and I'm kind of interested to see where it goes. They came out last week talking about TikTok. And for the most part, the core group of Anonymous have always been about, looking out for the people. We went after ISIS, took down a bunch of ISIS profiles. We were responsible for turning in a mass number of pedophiles. And it was funny because one of the local law enforcement agencies said that we took down more pedophiles in 3 months of work than their department did in like 3 years. Wow. But again warned us that if we did it again, that there'd be charges because we were disrupting current investigations that were going on. So, but they do have the old ideology, out for the people, making sure that governments don't oppress people. That is a pure, clean message, and I think everybody should be behind that message, not just Anonymous. But when a government gets too large and too imposing, I think it was Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Jefferson maybe that said it best, that you can't give up your freedoms, your liberties, in exchange for a little bit of protection, because you're not going to get either one of them. And in the U.S., they basically opened the door after 9/11. They instilled fear upon people. The fear and what happened on 9/11, and they used that against the people to get them to give up more of their liberties. And so, I mean, you look at London, the most surveilled country in the world, most surveilled city in the world. There's I can't remember how many thousands of security cameras per square mile. It's the most surveilled city. And to me, that's absurd. I mean, we took 1984 and made it look like, Curious George goes to church. We've taken the surveillance in the police state and blew it up to something massive. And now it's up to the people to kind of keep things in check. And when politicians are wrong or acting, inappropriately, it's their responsibility to call it out. I mean, the people pay for these positions to be filled. And they look to these people to, maintain their well-being, to keep the country safe, and to maintain order. I think during COVID-19, we saw, MPs making rules about, leaving to visit family members during a lockdown. And who were the first people to violate their own laws? It was the MPs. It's gotten to a point in the world that, government officials and politicians believe that they're a different class of people, and that treated differently than the citizens, when in my eyes they should be treated as equals, because we are the ones who pay them, and without our vote to put them in place, they're working at another shop down the street. So I think it's everybody's responsibility to keep that in check.
I think you're right, and the world has changed slightly in that. From my perspective, I feel like what we're now seeing is people taking a stand. So you've got Twitter taking a stand and saying they're going to call out Trump's inappropriate tweets. Facebook looking like they might do something, but only because they've been savaged by every other corporation. So it seems like actually the corporations that benefit from a liberal government or benefit from that kind of funding are actually starting to go, you know what, there's more at work here. We do have to be more respectful. We do have to treat each other a bit better. We don't want to be in the position that China are in, or Hong Kong are in with their security laws. Nobody wants the rest of the world to end up like that. It just feels like a shame that the opportunities that are there for governments to work with people like you and the people that you support, that those opportunities are there to actually do some good. You've got the old bad guy, good guy films, and then actually together, the bad guy and the cop can actually do something good. It's just finding a way to do it.
Yeah, it's funny you brought that up, because that's how this whole thing started for me. Was I gave a talk at Westminster University, and it was the first talk I'd ever given with law enforcement sitting next to me. So it was a really strange situation. I was really nervous, and they didn't tell me a cop was going to be there until 20 minutes before I started speaking. So here's this big crowd. I'm terrified because back then I was really scared of people in general. There's a huge crowd, and then there's a cop next to me, and I'm not really sure why this cop is here, and I just know he's going to be on the panel. So I didn't know what kind of interaction I was going to have. But what's funny is I became really good friends with that cop, and that cop's name is Andy Chapman, and I do a lot of work with him with the Cyber Prevent program, and the intervention workshops for the kids. And he's become a great confidant. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better situation coming to the UK and meeting the right people at the right time. And London Met Police have been fantastic. I mean, involving me in a lot of really cool projects.
Awesome. See, that's nice. It's nice to think that somebody's realised that actually there's good to come out of this. That if you don't educate kids about what's wrong and what's right, then they'll go and find it themselves. And actually, there's having people like yourself being allowed to talk to kids and expressing what the world is really like, rather than just the world that's presented to them, is hugely important. It's hugely important.
Exactly.
So for you now, with this sort of more legitimate hat on and that sort of commercial focus, like, how do you see the sort of next 10 years of the internet? Do you think we're going to have better control, less control? Do you think kids are going to have a better understanding? Is there a desire to do things better? How do you see it panning out?
Well, I think the future, as far as the internet goes, I think we're right on track for where we're supposed to be as far as development and new technology. But the environment in general is getting more hostile, and what you see on the streets also plays out on the internet, and vice versa. And it's kind of scary. You see what's going on in the U.S. with Antifa and Black Lives Matters, and the injustice that's happened with the police forces there. And it's really sad to think that that's where we're at as a society, and as a planet in general. You look at what happened during COVID-19 and the rush to open everything up because the greed, the financial greed, and the economy was falling, and governments don't want to pay that bailout. They don't want to, spend more money on the citizens, because in the U.S. they like to keep the citizens dependent on the government. But I think you're going to see a lot of more people on the internet waking up. Information is there, and a lot of the secrets are actually there, but just not found yet. And when I say that, I'm talking about people who have things misconfigured and exposing databases and stuff to the internet that probably hold some really secret information. But it's kind of scary when you look at the government and technology. You look at the COVID-19 track and tracing app that they quickly tried to slide under the radar at the last minute. That didn't work out too well. So, I mean, you look at the internet. The internet's a powerful tool. It has the ability to track people. It has the ability to expose people's lives 100%. It's a scary platform. And I think the rate that we're going in the general temperament of people in general, it's not going to be good unless we try to find a way to put on the brakes now and make a change. And that's kind of what I'm doing now with the kids. Is if I can reach those kids that are potential cyber criminals in the future, if I can reach them and help mentor them to a place where they're happy, to a place where they're successful, then it's not a huge dent, but at least I've done something to take away that next cyber criminal from an organized crime group that could be stealing millions of dollars. So that's what it looks like for the next 10 years for the internet. I think we're not going to see anything huge except for maybe issues with the internet architecture, because of all the people working from home and all the streaming services. I know that when everything went on lockdown, the bandwidth demand was huge. And I think that we're going to have to find ways for the internet to become more scalable. And I think that's going to be the new way of life. I think we're going to see a lot of brick and mortar shops and businesses close down in exchange for strictly internet business.
Yeah, I think, and that, do you know what? I agree, and I think that's the thing that makes me a little bit sad. That I think it's awesome that we're starting to realize and harness the power of technology and the internet and the world at large. But I don't want to lose that human interaction. I don't want to lose that physicality. That concept of people and being around people. I think that's what gives us empathy and gives us humanity and everything else. I think it'd be interesting to see how the world gets to that point and how we stave that off. Yeah. So it's just sort of bring us towards a sensible endpoint. If there's people watching this, if there's kids watching this, like my daughter thinks the whole anonymous and hackers thing is amazing. Like she's 7. I don't know. It's not my fault.
That's great.
How did What's your advice for getting into cyber? Not getting into the illegitimate side, but for creating that next generation of smart kids that can actually be of use to the government and to the public and commercial organisations. More importantly, like, what's your advice for anybody that wants to get started in this world? Like, where do you go? What do you do?
I think the beginning steps for anybody in any career is their childhood, right? So your upbringing, your environment tend to help you to the career path or future that you want. And I think a lot of the responsibility lies on the parents for the kids in an early age. My parents were great parents. My dad wasn't the best, but he did what he knew how to do. And he learned from his father. And the best thing he ever did for me was get me interested in electronics. But he didn't stifle me. He would basically give me the things I needed and allowed me to explore the possibilities. And I think that's important to encourage kids. There's programs out there for, girls who code. There's a big push, advocacy for women in IT and women in security in general. And I think that's fantastic. But to really get started, I think that people need to take a step back and decide why they want to be in IT, why they want to be in security. Is it to make a paycheck, or is it to contribute something to a greater good? I tend to find that the positions and the careers that I choose tend to be longer and more meaningful if it's not just for a paycheck, if it's that I truly believe in and something that that resonates within me, then I pursue it. And with certifications, it seems that a lot of companies rely pretty heavily on the possession of certifications in order to bring people into organizations. So with that being a natural evolution into a company, I would say focus on which certification you want, what certification interests you, what kind of career do you want to have after you obtain that certification, and just go for it. I never stop researching 24/7. I'm looking at something or trying to figure out how to code something or break something. To me, I was told at a young age, never let your job define who you are, because if you lose that job, then you've lost yourself. And it's very hard to bounce back from. But I never did that, because who I am, I define my job, and my job defines me. It's a different type of relationship, because without hacking and without what I do, I wouldn't have a job, and I wouldn't know what to do, because that's all I've done besides a couple of boxing matches here and there. But I would say just go for the certification that shows the most interest to you. And there's all kinds of resources on the internet, like VulnHub, like Hack the Box, for pen testers that really want to get into it. There's resources available to make yourself become a better pen tester, or to even learn how to pen test. And really latch on to people who've been in the industry for a while. I was fortunate when I came into the hacking circles to run into people and make bonds with people who are pretty big motivators, like Tom Ryan and Ralph Eshmandia. Ralph works for Oliver Stone and is a technical consultant for his movies, and he was in Oliver Stone's Snowden movie. And so with friends like that, I mean, you can't go wrong. They'll always put you on the path that you need to be on. And if you find it difficult to get those paths, they have ways to get you there. So really, a good portion of a career is having the right connections. So networking, conferences, and then get your certifications and make a smooth transition.
I like it. I like the networking thing. Getting back to the people, getting back to chatting, getting back to socializing.
Yep.
So when we're allowed back out, potentially, obviously you're on the speaker circuit, so people can catch you doing speaker sessions. Is there a place for people to check you out? Is there obviously you've got LinkedIn? Have you got Twitter?
I have Twitter. Yeah, I have Twitter. It's STING3R 2013.
Perfect. We'll stick that down in the comments down below as well, and obviously we'll put your LinkedIn down there. And you're with Sapphire as well for public speaking. So if anybody wants to book you for public speaking, I can highly suggest that you do. And obviously we'll put those details down below as well. Any final thoughts? Anything? Any gems of wisdom you want to give it? You're going to write a book, actually. That's the one question. Tell me you're going to write a book, like The Life of Mike Jones.
I've been approached about writing a book. I don't know how many times, and movie wanting me to talk to someone who could be, to put my life into a movie. But writing a book is so intimidating to me. Like I'm not a writer, and I wouldn't know where to start. So I don't know if a book is in my future unless somebody else writes it. And if anybody's listening that wants to write it, I'm all for it. You do the work, I'll take the credit.
But and then you just talk, and they just do their thing.
Yeah. I've talked to a ghostwriter. I've talked to one recently, tossed around the idea of putting together a book, but I'm still on the fence about it. To me, it's kind of a personal thing, and I feel like if I put it on paper, I'm giving that portion of myself up.
Yeah.
So it may come, it may not. It depends on that mode of thinking about it.
If you do, let me know, because I'll buy it.
Excellent. Appreciate it.
I've got one other question.
Sure.
And it's like, why is it Mike Jones brackets not an alias? Is it just because Mike Jones sounds like John Smith?
Okay, so back to my childhood. There's a guy named Mike Jones in Houston, of all places, where I'm from. Was really famous when I was a kid, and he's a rapper named Mike Jones. And so growing up as a kid, I'd go into restaurants or whatever and tell them my name, and they're like, he has this line from his rap, and it goes, "Who, Mike Jones?" So every time I go into a restaurant, I get that from everybody, and it got really annoying. So I put because people look at my background on LinkedIn, and they're like, who are you really? What's your real name? This can't possibly be, your true profile. Yeah. And I have to explain to people, yes, Mike Jones is my name. It's not an alias. And yes, this is my background. So
I always wondered, every time I see you on something, I'm like, why is it not an alias?
Yeah, people think people have thought I was a for probably about the past 15 years. So I put that there just to mess with them.
I like it. Well, Mike Jones, not an alias. That was awesome. Thank you very much for coming on. It's been probably one of my favourite pub chats to date. My daughter's going to watch it. She'll probably say it's boring. She says everything I do is boring, but we'll let her watch it. If you've enjoyed this, please do like, comment, subscribe, share. It helps us get it out further on YouTube if YouTube knows that you like it. If you want to talk to Mike, please do go and check him out and check out his Twitter and his LinkedIn. And hopefully when we're back out in the world, we'll see you doing some more speaking and stuff, which will be cool as well. But thank you very, very much for coming on. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good talking to you, man.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Cheers.